Koimora! Good morning, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And yes, you know what's wonderful about the internet is that we get to speak to people from places far removed from where we are. And through the channel, I've been very fortunate to meet Peter Crutchley, who you can see on the screen with me. Now, Peter is now in New Zealand, but you know, he's had a particular area of interest all his life. And I think that area of interest could be very instructive in where this channel is right now with some of the groups it's working with. Now, Peter, give me a bit of your background.
Right, a very good day to all of you, and thanks very much for the opportunity, Scott. Right, in terms of my background, just very briefly, I was born in South Africa, went to school in Germiston, a place called Germiston, or the Lake District. Anybody who's familiar with the Lake District, that's Germiston Lake and Boksburg Lake.
Right.
Went to school there and ended up at university in Durban, where I studied mechanical engineering, and then joined South African Airways, where I worked in the engineering department, the technical area, and then became involved with fleet planning, essentially determining which aircraft types we should get.
Right.
And it was while there that one really started looking hard at what the future might hold. And that played a role. But also, I always had an interest more in the people side of organizations than the technical side, and took an interest in leadership issues.
Right.
And ended up going on a number of leadership programs. So essentially, what I've got to propose today is just based on inputs that I've been very fortunate to receive as a result of that training. And if that can be of assistance in trying to get the coordination of various groups together, then that would be wonderful.
Yeah. So we'll touch on the coordination of groups in a second. But first of all, tell me a bit more about the latter days of your involvement with South African Airways. I mean, how you saw things change post-1994.
Yeah, well, essentially, I was involved with a group that was looking at the culture change issues. And it was during the time 94 to 98, of course, that there was the significant transition that took place with the management at this particular organization, South African Airways. And so I was able to witness the transition and was able to interact with the previous management as well as the new management that was coming in to take over. And I must say I was concerned about some of the trends that I saw. And that was partly what led to us leaving South Africa at the time.
Yeah, I can understand that. Now, you mentioned just now about an area that we're looking at as a channel in trying to facilitate disparate groups in the largely white community actually coming together. Because, you know, what you've got is you've got one group over here, you've got another group over there, and they won't talk to each other, and they've all got their members, and, you know, if you can't work together, you can't build anything. And
absolutely,
to build a future in South Africa, all these groups have got to put their pride behind them, and they've got to work together under some kind of umbrella with a common goal. Now, having said that, what are your thoughts, and how could that be facilitated?
Right. Okay. I think probably the simplest is if I detail a very simple concept, and it all links back to the leadership approach that is taken and the shared values that are developed.
Yeah.
So this particular staging, if I can put it that way, actually came from a video by a chap named Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, Simon Sinek, an American, and he gave a wonderful TED talk, which I'll send you the link to.
Fantastic.
Because it's directly relevant to this, and I would recommend that people watch it. But anyway, what he suggested was that all the great organizations or anything that has been really successful boils down to 3 points. People define, first of all, why they do it. then how they do it, and then what they do. Now, that is not normally what happens, is the point that he was making.
Yeah.
Normally, people know what they do, or a company knows what it does.
Yeah.
But people from the outside are never really told or do not fully understand why it's being done or how it's being done.
Ah, I see what you're saying.
And the point he is really making is people buy into something based on why you are doing it, not what you are doing.
Right.
So, for example, you are doing what you're doing, right? You're filling this role of coordinating and getting the truth out about what's going on in South Africa and so on. So that is what you are doing. You're producing these videos. That's what you are doing. The why you are doing it, people try and figure it out, and they read between the lines, and they try and get an idea of what's going on. But the more clearly, the point is this, the more clearly one spells out why we're doing this thing, or why you're doing a particular thing, and that we figure out how we're going to do it, and then comes the what, you see? And that's where the power really comes from. So my proposal is simply that we put together a one-page document. It cannot be my ideas, it cannot be your ideas. It's got to be a joint effort. So what I'm proposing here are merely thoughts that I came up with last night in terms of how I would put this together. But please don't interpret what I'm saying here as being this is the way it's got to be. These are purely some ideas to explain the concept.
Sure.
So the why might be helping South Africans in need, whether they're staying or going, something like that. And that there is the core of the whole thing. That is what needs a huge amount of time and effort to come up with the right wording, the right concept. So that's something that I just happened to put together. I'm not saying that that's right at all. But the point is this, the why cannot be to become famous, to become world-renowned for this wonderful effort we're putting in, to try and make money out of channeling funds from one group to another. You with me? Because that's what people are highly, highly suspicious of.
Right.
So that is why the why is so important. It's not only what is written there, it's what is not written there.
Right.
If that makes sense to you.
Absolutely.
Because that is what we've got to be committed to. We're not trying to make money out of this. We're not trying to become famous as a result of this. In fact, I'd rather stay behind the scenes. I'm not the sort of person that's into publicity. So, so it's why are we doing what we're doing? That is the real key to the whole thing.
Right.
And it's got to be done jointly with inputs from various groups that have an interest. So that's one of the things we need to do. Then the how is really the values that we stand for. And this is the other really important part, not only what we stand for, what we stand against, and what we will never tolerate.
Right.
That's very important. So it's that distinction between the values we stand for and the values we stand against, if I can put it that way. So it could be, I'll give you some examples now to put things in perspective.
Perfect.
We'll be saying, well, what do you mean by values? It's all airy-fairy, touchy-feely stuff. It doesn't make sense. But it does make a whole lot of sense, particularly when you involve the people in jointly generating these. And again, this only becomes powerful and meaningful to the people when they involve. Involvement equals commitment. There's no way around that. So what I come up with, people, you won't feel committed to it. Nobody else will feel committed to it because they weren't involved with it. So that's why I say what I'm coming up with is purely examples. And the other point I want to make on the how, i.e. the values, is it's the order. This is something I only realized very deep into this exploration of leadership.
Right.
It becomes so obvious when I mention it.
Yeah.
But let's say you've got only two values, to please the customer and to make money. right? So it's very simple. I've only got two values. It's a company, and I want to serve the customer, and I want to make money.
Mm.
Well, which one comes first?
Right. So it's a chicken and the egg.
So what I'm saying is, you can't have a set of values and not prioritize them.
Right. I get
You've
you.
got to have your priorities,
Yeah.
and you've got to prioritize them. So we need to keep it simple.
Yeah.
We need to have maybe 4 or 5 values that we stand for.
Yeah.
And we need to prioritize them. Which is the number one and which is the number two, and so on. So
Right.
that's all part of the process that is so important in getting people to buy into this thinking. So I'll give you some examples of the things that I had down.
Right.
There needs to be transparency. These are not in any particular order now, right?
Yeah.
I'm just throwing things around.
Sure.
Transparency, openness. We need to encourage criticism. This is the paradox of leadership. If you don't want criticism, then encourage criticism. That's a paradox. Doesn't make sense.
Right.
If you don't want criticism, encourage it. And that's the sort of thing which is critical or crucial in a process like this, in my view. We need to get it out there and say, look, we're open, be transparent. We're not doing anything behind the scenes here. And on top of that, we want you to criticize the living daylights out of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Go for it. You tell us exactly, because that helps us to get better. That helps us to refine our values and improve. So that's another example of a value, is to encourage criticism, to protect sources who wish to be protected, which is something that I think you've been very good at doing. You have not divulged names of people where they have said, please don't say who we are.
Yeah, no, I never do that.
Yeah, exactly. So that can be a value. Of course, servant leadership, an approach, the leadership approach is absolutely critical. It's all about turning the pyramid upside down. It's all about being there to support other people. And that's why people are flocking or going to your channel, because they realize intuitively that that is the sort of leadership that you're displaying. You're doing this to serve others. You're not doing it for any other reason.
That's exactly right.
It's a very, very powerful thing, and there's a lot more that can be said on that principle. I'd also just like to mention that it actually gets back to 2 words, and it's quite very important: the care and growth of other people. That is what true leadership is all about. It's those 2 words.
Yeah.
And that's thanks to a chap by the name of Etzko Skatemer, who's the brother of Jerry Skatemer, who I've happened to have met and attended their courses.
Right.
But anyway, the care and growth concept of leadership is absolutely critical. So that can be a value. What is our leadership style? Absolutely critical. Another thing is, do not alienate potential allies.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's absolutely crucial, and particularly at a time when hate speech is being thrown around and people are being hauled over the coals for doing just about anything now and saying anything. I think that we've got to be very, very objective and, I'd say, purposeful in how we deal with that. We are operating in an open environment. We're encouraging criticism, and we are not alienating any group. We are not doing this only for a specific group of people with a particular color skin, because I think that would torpedo it. And that's not what we're about. Well, this is in the interest of all South Africans who are in deep trouble.
Exactly. It's people who have a common belief. That's the whole critical issue. Now, look, I'm a very spontaneous sort of guy, okay, and people are just appearing out of the woodwork, like you. I mean, at critical times when things are happening, and I always look at that very carefully and say, hey, here's someone who could play a very important role at this particular time as we're trying to achieve a certain objective. And this is one of those points in time. So I'm just going to ask you a very simple question. I've got to speak to a couple of people in my close Loving Life community team. Would you be interested in giving advice and support and using your experience and expertise and helping these groups actually find common ground and actually starting to work together?
Of course, I will do whatever I can to contribute. I don't say I'm the best person to actually facilitate groups or something like that, but I certainly have inputs which I think could be helpful. And of course, I would be able, wherever I can contribute, I will. And it's because of my commitment to doing whatever I can to help people who are desperately in need.
Yeah.
So yes, the answer is yes. Just getting back to the values, Scott.
Yeah.
We were talking, so we looked at the why, we were touching on the how, which was the values, and I've just given some ideas on the sort of values we stand for.
Yeah.
But I also mentioned that we need to stipulate what we stand against and we will not tolerate.
Right.
And the sort of things that are essential, I think, are things like no corruption, no discrimination, things like that.
Yeah.
And of course, that goes on to other things as well, no cruelty, and there are all sorts of different things one can throw in. But in terms of how the groups are going to work together, I think that we need to make it clear that we will not. I mean, one of the biggest problems in the world today is corruption. So what good are we if we conduct our business in such a way that it is not open and that there might be corruption going on behind the scenes? We're trying to influence things for a particular reason.
Yeah.
And so things like that, we need to spell out very clearly what we do not and will not tolerate. And groups who do not subscribe to these things will automatically fall by the way and won't want to be part of it.
Right.
So the wonderful thing about a process like this is that it's freedom of choice. People can decide, hang on, this makes sense. Yes, we want to be part of it, or we don't. And so it absolutely sorts the men from the boys, the wood from the trees, and without anybody having to say anything harsh to anybody. It all sorts itself out naturally. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now, obviously, you would produce a document that anyone could get a hold of.
Absolutely.
Have all these things listed in. Yeah.
What we could do is the two or three or four of us could just jot down some ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first time we've spoken. But a couple of us could just put down our ideas. I could just put a format out there.
Yeah.
Jot down some ideas like I've suggested here.
Yeah.
Just to get the discussion going.
Sure.
You can add in, it doesn't matter who it comes from. It can come from anybody. We could even put it out in some public way and say, we need your input.
Yeah.
And get people to fill it out. And out of that, we can then sort it and come up with something that really makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's a process, and it's a very simple process. And that's what I like about it. I'm not into complicated things, and people lose interest. So it's got to be a very simple one-page document. So any other questions on the value side, Scott, before we move on to the what?
I just want to make a statement here, and that is that the Loving Life channel, all it is a gateway. I'm the facilitator, and with this objective that we have to try and bring these groups together, I would not be involved in any way in a in decision making or anything like that. I would have a team of people who would involve the groups. I would be totally on the side. I'd leave it up to these guys to get on with it and make it happen, because I really have a vision which covers a whole lot of areas, and what I don't want to do is get this channel bogged down into one particular project, and having really capable people looking after it and developing it and making it work is really what I want to make happen. Yeah,
that makes sense. And by the way, Scott, there's also some very, very simple tools where I could assist perhaps in terms of decision making. So when it comes to specific options, how to choose between the options, there's some really simple techniques that one can apply there. But we're probably getting ahead of ourselves.
It sounds fantastic. So carry on to the next stage of what we're...
Right, so we've looked at the why, which is essentially the vision for the coordination of the groups. The how, which is the values we stand for and what we stand against. And then we get on to the what. And the what flows from the why and the how. And so I'll just mention some of the things that could flow out of that. But again, you can see because the one leads to the other leads to the next. Obviously, these are just again examples. So it would be things like networking, which is what you're doing. It's networking of people and groups within South Africa, as well as networking of people and groups outside of South Africa. This could be expats or any interested party, anybody who has empathy with the country, anybody who wants to see a better outcome. So networking would be a really important what. Another important issue would be information. The flow of information. What sort of information? Facts, trends, where you can get information on immigration, where you can get information on prepping, or whatever it might be. So it becomes a repository, or becoming a repository of information is another vital what, which is again what you are largely doing. So nothing revolutionary there. So yeah, anyway, those are just some of the thoughts that I have in terms of the why, how, and the what. And you can see that it is something that needs a lot of work and a lot of effort, but it's a simple, and it's actually a very enlightening process.
Well, look, I think your knowledge in this area is absolutely invaluable. What I'll be doing is I'll be talking to a couple of people in my team and putting you in touch with them. And I think the timing couldn't be more perfect because, if we do this right, we can actually make it happen. And with your knowledge in that area, rather than go and put the cart before the horse, you can start working on, as you say, the whole basics of how you're going to develop this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it then becomes very clear who actually wants to work together with this basis, because I'm not comfortable with working with anybody who doesn't subscribe to a certain set of values that I've been involved with developing. If there are things that people stay or leave based on the value system that is being lived. And that is the key to the whole thing. So, the sooner we get something like this going, the clearer things will become in terms of who can, in fact, work together.
Well, look, I can assure you, in my channel, things work very fast. I mean, we've had some projects which, they haven't been involved in what we're talking about here, which is actually getting different groups in South Africa to work together under one roof for a common goal. But, if they could, it would actually, probably 80% of people who are on my channel say, isn't it a shame that all these different groups can't work together? Because if they could then do something. But
absolutely,
they have their own little ivory towers, if they knew that their main focus and their operation would not be affected in any way, they continue doing what they're doing, but they work collaboratively with all these other groups with a common goal. It's actually going to increase their visibility, and a lot more people will join them because you've got this bigger vision happening.
Absolutely. That's the only way that I can see to get groups to work together. And I think it's a very powerful process, and it's a very simple, fairly what can I say? It does take time. But because it's a fairly simple thing, everybody soon gets the hang of it, and we move forward from there. But once it's done, this is the other thing I just want to mention. Values, they become cast in stone only as long as everybody agrees they should be cast in stone. When somebody comes up with something better, that's what happens with an open organization, and that's what this will be. It will be completely open.
Yeah.
So once we've had a go at defining all this, we might in due course, a year down the line or 6 months down the line, somebody else might come up with something better. Then we get everybody together and to bounce it off them through the internet. Say, look, this really is a sound proposal. So we just do the coordination on this, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
And as there's need for a change, then it changes. But what one finds with this is that it becomes very, very powerful.
Yeah.
People that have signed up to this, people that have contributed to it, become very resistant to changing it once it's all been established, because it becomes part of you.
Yeah.
You've contributed, and that's where the involvement equals commitment is such a key part of it.
Yeah.
If you don't involve people, they'll never be committed. So involve people, get them committed, but also remain open so that if new groups or anybody else wants to come in and there's good reason to change something, well, then we change it.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Look, I really appreciate your time. I will be speaking, as I say, to a couple of people. I will send them, with your permission, your email address, and
With pleasure.
And what I'll do also is I will direct them to this video. And you know, as I say, I'm just a facilitator. I'm just a gateway, and then I will leave it to them to actually talk to you about how we can actually use your experience and expertise to actually take this to the next level. And I'll just take a background seat, because I'll be working on other things in the background with other people in the project.
That would only be a pleasure, Scott. Thanks very much, and all the best.
Thank you very much, Peter, and have a lovely day. I know Kiwi time, you must be at about what?
11 o'clock. It's around 11 in the morning.
Yeah, it's nearly 9 o'clock here.
Only a pleasure, and we'll talk to you again.
Okay, take care. Bye for now.
Take care. Bye.